Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video. In this video, I will be kitting down all of my projects from April, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about the books that I read in March and April. I was not able to film one of these monthly D-kits at the beginning of April, so I never shared the books that I read in March, so I figured why not do them all together? Now, I read 26 books in March and 21 books in April. My book log is not fully updated, but the books that I need to talk about towards the end are the ones that I read most recently, so I should be okay to just give you a quick synopsis without my book log being updated, but we'll see how that goes. So I have 3 kits that I finished in March. I have 3 kits that I finished in April. Monday's video was my month in review, so if you want to see the finishes for those, you can definitely check back to that video. So we have 3 that will be de-kitting, not in any particular order. I'm going to start with this storage system, which was, I think, the second kit that I finished. So anyway, I'm going to keep the ABs off to the side because I will deal with those separately. So let's go ahead and get started. So let me bring my iPad over. All right, so the first book that I read in March was, there are people walking outside my window. Consider Me by Becca Mack, which is a hockey romance. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. 150, that's the wrong color. See what happens when I get distracted? 153, there we go. That looks closer. So this book was about Carter and Olivia, I think her name was. And it's a hockey romance, which are very popular right now in the book world. I like hockey romances. I don't really watch hockey, so I don't know what's happening, but so Carter is like a playboy, I guess, before he meets Olivia, and then he meets her and is just obsessed, and he's really cute. He's really just like a big nerd, and I love that. I like when guys are like, I don't know, they put off this certain vibe, but when you get to know them, they're actually like really big teddy bears and just super cute. That's kind of how Steven is, actually. Like, when you look at him, you're like, oh, okay. Like, he just has this, I don't know, like, is resting bitch face a thing for men? Because, like, I have a strong case of resting bitch face, but yeah, so I like that he kind of has this like reputation, but then he meets Olivia and he's just this big teddy bear. It was cute. I liked it quite a bit. It's the first book in the Playing for Keeps series. There's only 2 books out right now, which I did read the second one. The hockey team is, I don't know, I think it's like a pretty strong found family type of feel, so I'm excited to see whose book is the third one, because I liked all of the men, like the hockey players in the story. After that, I kept reading the Playboys of New York series, which I started in February. So the next one was Taking Control. Some of these are so long ago that I really don't totally remember what happened, so I apologize, but I'll do the best I can. I gave this book also 4 stars, it looks like. So this one was about Stella and EJ. So if you're like remembering back to the books I read in February, it's like a group of girl best friends and then a group of guy best friends, and this one is Stella and EJ, who is the brother of one of the other girls in the group. And I think this one was my favorite in the series. He's a professional chef and she's his personal assistant, and something happened in the book prior to this one, and Stella needed somebody to take care of her, and she had a crappy boyfriend who like wasn't interested, so EJ did it, and then they kind of just, their story evolved from there. I just felt like their story was just more like in depth. I felt like there was like a better story to their backstory, if that makes sense. I really enjoyed it. And then I think this was the last one in that series, Without Warning. I gave that one also a 4-star, it looks like. And the main male character's name is Reese, and the girl's name is Ariana. I didn't love her character. She was just a little too much for me. I don't know. She was just a little bit in your face. They meet under very strange circumstances, and it just, the book just starts out with that, like right away. Like page 1, you're in that weird situation. Yeah, it was interesting. I think I might knock that one down to a 3.5. I don't know if it was a 4 thinking back to it. But I did enjoy it, and I liked Reese's character quite a bit. And then I went back to the Playing for Keeps series, and I read book 2, which is the last one that's out right now. And this one is called Play With Me, and it is Carter's little sister, Jenny, from the first book, and one of his teammates, Garrett. I loved this one. I don't know which one I liked better. It was a 4-star again. I feel like I give out 5 stars pretty freely, but I don't know. I also don't at the same time. So I really liked it. But Jenny just wasn't my favorite again. I don't know. She was just really, I don't know. It's like pessimistic, I guess. I didn't love her, but I loved Garrett's character. However, the thing that really drew me to this book was the background story of Carter and Olivia from book 1. They had some stuff going on in the background, and I really loved that. So I don't know if I loved it for Jenny and Garrett, or if I just loved it for the Carter-ness that was in the background. So I did like it, though. I am excited to see, like I said before, where this series goes and who is the next one to get a book. After that, I went back to the Sullivan series. If you watched my first couple of videos in this month in review type of thing, like monthly D-Kit type of video, I had said that I was working my way through the Sullivan series again, which is by an author named Bella Andre. This is an old series. It's one that I had read when I was younger, and then I decided to check in on it, and there had been so many new books that I wanted to reread the ones that I had already read. So I read Come a Little Bit Closer, which is about Smith and Valentina. Smith is an actor, a very famous actor, and he wrote a movie, so now he's starring in it, and he's starring in it with Valentina's little sister. I did like this book. I remember it being one of my favorites in the series the first time I read it. I just liked their characters. Like, they're both very protective older siblings, and they just kind of fit together very well. I gave it a 3-star just because I've read so many good books that sometimes going, not to say that Bella Andre isn't a good author, but sometimes going back to some of these older books, it's just like, it was okay. So I did give it a 3-star, but I did really enjoy it. I remember it being one of my favorite, like more favorite within the series. And then I went to Always on My Mind, which is also from the Sullivan series. And this was the last one in like the original series with all those siblings. And this is Lori and Grayson's. So Lori is the twin sister of one of the other Sullivans. And I liked this book because it was so different from the other ones. Grayson is a farmer, and Lori like leaves one of her jobs. She's a choreographer, and she just leaves it and ends up on this farm and they, you know, have their whole storyline. I really liked it, but I did give it 3 stars again, just because of those same reasons that I mentioned in the last book. And then I read Kissing Under the Mistletoe, which is actually, it's the story of the parents of the Sullivan siblings, and I just didn't really care enough. So this one is called Kissing Under the Mistletoe, and I don't know if it's because it was, well, first of all, I just didn't really care. I didn't need their parents' stories. Like, the background that the siblings give about their parents is enough for me. I didn't need a whole book dedicated to them. And it was also a Christmas book in March that I just didn't really want to read, but I wanted to stick to my goal of reading 3 a month. So it was okay. I gave it 2 stars. I just didn't really need it. I don't think it needed to be included in the series at all, in my opinion. All right. Next up, I read Throne Princess by L.J. Shen. This is my first book from this author, and I read it because she had a different book coming out with one of my favorite authors later, which I'll get to. I think I read that in April. I don't know. I didn't love it. So the main female character, I can't even remember her name, if I'm being completely honest with you. She's the daughter of a former president, and she's just a hot mess. She is always getting in trouble. She drinks too much. She basically just lives off her parents, and her dad, something happens and she gets in a lot of trouble, and her dad hires this like personal security guy who is also there to just keep her in check. His name is Ransom, which is just such a random name. It was okay. I did not like the main female character. Again, I can't remember her name. I feel like I've said that so much in this video. I don't like the female. She was just a spoiled brat in the beginning. Like, she just thought she didn't have to do anything and she would just live off of her parents. And I don't enjoy that in any book. But then she meets Ransom and he's like, puts her back in place, I guess. Their little love story is cute. I like how it ended. She ended up finding her passion and is doing it her own way. She's not doing it off of the back of her parents. She actually cut ties with her family at one point to like really find herself, and I did like that. So I definitely liked the ending much better than the actual story, because her and I were gonna have beef if she kept going on with her spoiled bratness. It was driving me nuts. So 3 stars for that one. Okay, this next book, I need this. This is definitely a dark romance. It's like a dark romance mystery thriller type of vibe, which mystery books and thriller books aren't generally my style because I'm a scaredy cat, and it is what it is. But it is called Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. So this book is about Enzo and Sawyer, and Sawyer is on the run from something that happened in her life, and she meets these men and steals their identity so that she can continue to like fly under the radar. So she meets Enzo and something happens. They hit it off, they click, and then she steals his identity, but he figures it out and he finds her, and then, you know, some crazy things happen. They end up shipwrecked, and some strange man takes them in that lives in a lighthouse. And yeah, that whole, I don't want to give anything away because, whoa, like, it kind of blew my mind. I gave this book a 3.5 star. I enjoyed it. It's just not my general, like, genre. I don't necessarily do the mystery thriller. Now, the reason that I wanted to read this book is because this particular author has written a very popular dark romance mystery type of duet called the Cat and Mouse Duet, and I had heard it recommended to read this book before going into her other two books because those are very dark. So this was kind of like a way to submerge yourself into her type of writing. So that's what I did. I did like it. It wasn't a favorite, but I liked it. If you're into that type of mystery thriller type of thing, you may really enjoy it. It was just okay for me. All right. Next, I read Devious Lies by Parker S. Huntington. Parker S. Huntington is one of my favorite authors. She wrote Darling Venom, which is a 5-star read for me. I loved that book, so I decided to go through her backlog and see what else I wanted to read, and this book popped up. So this book is about Emery and Nash, and it's kind of an interesting backstory. Like, they knew each other when they were kids because she comes from a very like powerful family, and he was the son of caretakers for her parents' mansion. So like her father was the gardener and his father was the gardener and his mother was, I think, like the maid or something. And then there's this huge downfall of Emery's family, and now Nash is the powerful one, and she becomes his intern, and it's just very interesting. I gave this book 4.5 stars because I really enjoyed it. I liked the fall from grace for Emery, not because I didn't like her character, because I actually did. It was her mother's character that I hated. But I liked her fall from grace and Nash's rise to power. I just like how Parker S. Huntington wrote that storyline. I thought it was very intriguing. I feel like it was an interesting take on like the enemies to lovers trope, if you're familiar with tropes in the book world. $4.98. There were just some twists and turns that happened in this book that I was not expecting, and I quite enjoyed it. And I think a lot of that is just that I really enjoy Parker S. Huntington's writing. It just kind of sucks me in. So I really enjoyed that one. That was a 4.5 star for me. Next up, I felt like I read quite a few like darker books in a row that I really just wanted a cute, feel-good rom-com. So I picked up The Royals Next Door by Karina Halley, I think it is. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I did enjoy it. It reminds me of like Meghan Markle and Prince Harry if those two people were likable. Fun fact, I despise Meghan Markle for no real reason, because I don't know the woman, so it's not like I hate her because I don't, but I don't like the controversy, which I know goes both ways, to each their own. I don't wish any of them ill, but as soon as I started reading this, just the like talking of the prince and his now wife, it was very strong Meghan and Harry vibes. But this book actually is not about them. They were just side characters. It was about their like chief protection officer, I guess is what he was, and a woman named Piper who lives on the property that these people decided to rent. So she lives in like what used to be the servant housing, I guess. And they were just so cute. I loved them. The Piper's mom has some, serious mental health issues, and the way that they talk about that was just really refreshing. I enjoyed that. And my favorite thing was that there was no third act breakup. So these two characters, Piper and Harrison, just decided that they loved each other, and there was no conflict. They were willing to make it work for whatever they needed to do. And I loved it. Sometimes I just get so sucked into these like trashy romance novels where something is always going wrong. And for these two, they just knew that they loved each other and they were willing to just figure it out. And it was so refreshing. I really enjoyed it. I recommend that one for sure if you're just looking for a cute, feel good little romance book. I quite enjoyed it. Oh gosh, okay. Whew, these next two books. Oh well, okay. So this is a duet. It's two books by the same author. The first one is The Love of My Next Life, and the second one is This Life and All the Rest. I read these in 2 days. I read one book and then I read the next one the following day because I loved them so freaking much. I cried, I laughed, I loved them. 5 stars, both of them. These are my first books by this particular author. I need to go back and see, like I need to look through her backlog to see what else she has, but if it's anything like these 2 books, I'm sold. Pretty sure these are on Kindle Unlimited, but I have the physical copies. So the characters are Macon, I don't know how to say that, Macon and Lennon. So she is best friends with Macon's sister Claire, and she has always just kind of had this crush on Macon, and I think he's a little bit older, he's troubled, he has some, you know, he's kind of like a bad boy, and he kind of just strings her along, and it just messes with her head a little bit. And her friendship with Claire is just not ideal. Like, she thinks it's great, but you kind of just get these little tidbits of information about Claire just being like a biatch and using her, kind of using Lennon, that is. So there is a questionable trope in this one, which I don't want to say because it's like a big spoiler. So if you do decide to read it, once you get to that part, you'll be like, ah, yes. But their relationship, Lennon and Macon's relationship, starts before this other thing is revealed. I know I'm being very vague, but I don't like to spoil things, at least as much as I can not spoil them. And it's questionable, right? Because, okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop there because I'm gonna spoil the whole book, and I just highly recommend that you read it. But basically, there's this big thing that happens, and then there's a bunch of miscommunication, and Lennon ends up in a different country, and they're separated by they're basically forced into separating, and it's just a big miscommunication, and lots of things happen, and I ate this book up. I was crying by the end of it, and I freaking love it. I want to read it again. Giant cliffhanger on the first one. So I read the first book in one day. It was like 10:30 at night, and I had to read the first chapter of the following book because I needed to know what happened, at least just like an idea, so I could sleep that night. So then I went on to This Life and All the Rest, which is the second book. It picks up a few years after book 1. Lennon lives abroad at that point. She only visits home like once in a while. There's something happens at the end of book 1 that forces her to come home, and she's, you know, forced to be around Macon again. Generally, when she would go home, he wouldn't be around, or he'd be out of town, and that's kind of how that worked. But he's there, and things happen again, and you find out that Claire, the evil sister slash best friend, kept something from Lennon, and she basically like ruined those few years for Macon and Lennon. Like, it just destroyed everything that they had, and it was just so sad. I was crying, but eventually they're able to work everything out, and it ends in a happy ending, which I'm so glad, because those two had been through so much throughout these books, and I don't know, I really recommend this duology. It was so good. I loved it so much. I want to read it again and annotate it, which I don't often annotate books because I feel like it slows me down a lot, but this this set of books is definitely one that I would be willing to go back through and do that. So I do recommend, just know that there is a questionable relationship that happens in the first book. That's kind of the reason that certain things happen that lead into book 2. So that's all I'm going to say. Okay, after that, I went into another hockey romance, which is called Mile High by Liz Tom Ford. I think it's just Tom Ford. There's an E at the end, so I never know if it's Tom Ford or Tom Forday. Anyway, that doesn't matter. This book is Xander's and Stevie. So Xander's is this big hockey bad boy. It's like his, he like puts on an act, right? Him and his best friend play together, and the best friend is like the good guy, family man. And then Xander's puts on this bad boy persona. And then he meets Stevie, who is a flight attendant on the team plane, the team hockey plane. So when they fly out of town or out of country, whatever, she is one of the flight attendants that takes care of the players. And yeah, I enjoyed this book. I did give it a 5-star, but thinking back, I think I would probably knock it down to like a 4.5. Just because I've thought about it a little bit, and I think that there are certain things that maybe I didn't love. Particularly, Xander's kind of pressures Stevie into, like, not a relationship, and he doesn't, like, force her to do anything that she doesn't want to do, but she has been very clear that her job is at risk for fraternizing with players. Like, she's just not allowed to do it. And he just kind of doesn't care, I guess. But eventually they just kind of overcome. My biggest issue is that Stevie is, again, she wasn't a favorite. She had very, very low self-esteem, which is something that I get. Like, I feel you, Stevie. We're on the same page. But every other page where she had, not necessarily dialogue, but when it was like her inner thoughts, it was just her constantly focusing on what people are thinking of her and how she looks. And I get it, but also enough is enough. Like, at some point, it's just like, you look how you look. You know, but it wasn't tied to, like, she didn't necessarily have a storyline of, like, body dysmorphia or anything like that. It was just kind of the author, like, drilling in that this character was plus size. She was mixed race. I think she had, like, crazy curly hair. And it was, like, everything just had to be, like, don't forget, she's not a size 2. And it's like, I don't care. That's just personal feelings, right? It's just, for me, when I'm reading a book, I've talked about this before, I like to just escape and enjoy the book. And sometimes when it's too real lifey, if you will, I'm like, okay, I've had enough. Let's move on. And that's kind of how I felt towards the end of this book. But I will say the ending of this book was amazing. I loved it so much. I really, really enjoyed it. After that book, I decided to go back and finish the Court of Thorns and Roses series, or at least what's out at this point. So I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is a fantasy book, and it is a hefty book. It's like, I think it was almost 800 pages, and I was like, it took me a long time. I think it took me about a week to read it, which is a long time for me. I'm not going to give any spoilers because the previous books lead up to this book, but this one is in the point of view of Nesta, which is one of Feyre's sisters. It's her oldest sister. And I hated Nesta in all of the other books. To be honest, I still don't love her, but after this book, I at least like her. She goes through a lot, and she, redeems herself in the end. the thing that I liked most about this book were the new characters that were introduced. There were some other females that were introduced to the story, and I really adored them. I do feel like this book was quite a bit more on the like adult romance type of spectrum, if you know what I mean. It was spicy, and I don't necessarily feel like it needed to be spicy. Now, listen, I like my spicy books. Like, we know this. I talk about quite a few, but there's just this particular series, I feel like the story is just so good, in my opinion, that I don't need the added spice. I love the characters enough to actually just really enjoy their story. So it was good. I gave it a 5-star because ACOTAR in general, the whole series is a 5-star for me. It wasn't my favorite book in the series. I definitely prefer some of the books from Feyre's point of view, but I liked it, and I'm excited to see who's getting their next book. Personally, I hope it's Lucien. I cannot wait to find out what happens with his mate and you know, all that fun stuff. So I'm hoping it's Lucien. It's probably going to be Asriel, but we'll find out probably in like 5 years at this point. But I did really enjoy it. Did I give you my rating for Mile High? I think I did. Court of Silver Flames was a 5-star. And then I decided to go back to that same series, the same world that Mile High is set in, for The Right Move, which is, again, by Liz Tom Ford. This book is about Ryan, who is Stevie's brother from book 1, and her friend, who's another flight attendant, Indy. Her name's Indigo, but she goes by Indy. And I loved this book. This one's definitely a 5-star. I think I would go back and knock The Right Move down to a 4.5-star, especially after reading The Right Move, because it's so good. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but basically Indy is broken up with and she has nowhere to live. She's saving up for a medical procedure, and Stevie... Oh, hold on one second, guys. Sorry about that. Steven's out and he's stopping at the grocery store for me. So even though I was like, hey, can you grab blah, blah, blah? He just texted me, what do you need from the grocery store? Oh, gotta love it. Okay, so back to The Right Move. Indy is saving up for a medical procedure, and Stevie basically begs her brother, like, you have this giant penthouse, can you just keep her, give her a room for a little bit so she can save up some money? Ryan is an NBA player, and he's like, whatever, I'm never home, it's fine. And they're just so cute. I love them so much. I'm gonna give a little tiny spoiler because I need to talk about this, so if you don't want to hear it, just skip forward like 30 seconds. So Indy's father is deaf. Ryan comes in while she's like FaceTiming with her parents and sees that Indy and him are doing sign language together, and she's like, oh, my dad's deaf and whatever. He goes and learns sign language so he can communicate with her dad, and they're not even dating, they're just friends at that point, and it's so cute. So he's like at this basketball event and he has a fan, and it turns out that she's deaf, and he starts doing sign language, and that's how Indy learned that he decided to learn sign language. Oh my gosh, it was so cute. I loved it so much. 5 stars for that book. 100%. I want to reread it. I just loved the two of them together. I'm assuming, I think there is another book. Oh, that's right. There's another book in this series that's coming out later this year, about somebody else that lives in their building, and he's an MLB player, so I'm very much looking forward to that one. I like this series because it's like found family, and it's different sports. So normally it's like you get a hockey romance and then you get every team member's story in like the series, but this is a hockey player, a basketball player, now we're getting a baseball player. It's just kind of cool. Quite enjoy it. Okay, then I started the Ravenhood series, I think is what it's called, and the first book is called Flock. It's by Kate Stewart. I would class this as like a mystery romance. This one, something happened in this first book that I was not expecting. I didn't really have much context. I just saw this one and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So this follows, what is her name? What is her name? Is it like Cecilia or something? I don't actually know her name. But she meets this boy named Sean. She moves to a small town and lives with her dad to intern at his company. And if she does it for a certain amount of time, I think it's a year, he'll pay for all of her college and she'll come into a certain amount of money and she's going to give it to her mom because her dad never supported them, I guess, when she was younger. And so she moves and she meets this guy named Sean, who is a supervisor at the plant that she goes to work at. And then she meets Sean's friend Dominic, and that's the thing that I wasn't expecting. The three of them kind of enter into a polyamorous relationship. So I was not expecting that. I didn't know that that happened, but it's definitely not like in your face if you're not someone who's normally into that, which I don't generally read like why choose type of novels, but it wasn't awful. It didn't like take away from the storyline, in my opinion. I didn't hate it, which was good. I gave this book a 4-star. So it ends up that these guys that she's met, they're called the Raven Hood, and they actually take down like corrupt people and businesses. And obviously they have targeted her dad. So very interesting things happen. The mystery was definitely there for me. It was a little bit spicy in certain spots, but I actually was like more drawn to the mystery and what was happening than the romance aspect. So I did like it. So then I went on to the second book, which is Exodus. And this book broke me quite a few times. I gave this one a 4-star as well. Something happens to one of the characters and it's very sad, but you kind of have to get through some things that happened at the end of the first one. The main character, I cannot remember her name and it's driving me nuts. Anyway, she comes back to town and things just keep happening. So, yes. Did she come back to town? No, I'm like backtracking if I'm remembering it correctly. But anyway, I do recommend it. I did like it. So then I finished the series, which is The Finish Line. And I gave this one a 5-star. Now, a lot of people have said that they felt like this book could have just been an extended epilogue in like book 2, that it didn't need its own book. But I felt like after everything these characters went through, this book was just like, finally, some good things are happening. Like, it was just a little bit more like feel good. There is still some mystery drama that happens, but I liked how the series was wrapped up. I liked how the couple, his name is Tobias, and I loved him, but I can't think of her name at all. I feel like it's Cecilia or something like that. But I did really enjoy the third book, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. Oh, yes. Okay. Then I went into a mafia romance trilogy, I think this is. I think there's 3 of them. I read The Sweetest of Oblivion by Danielle Laurie, and I don't normally do mafia romances. They're not my favorite just because it's so outlandish to me. I mean, I'm sure that there are people that live in these lives. It's just seems so far-fetched to me. But the first book in this series, Nico and Elena, is very interesting. So Nico is engaged, like arranged marriage engaged to Elena's younger sister, and that doesn't happen because the two of them get together. It was just something happens with Elena's little sister, and Nico calls off the wedding, and he's like, the only way that you can make this up to me, to the other like mafia family, is I'll marry your other daughter. And it's this weird weird thing, arranged marriage. I don't know. just weird things happen. I ended up really enjoying how it ended. I felt like these two characters were meant to be together. It's just the way that it happens because of the mafia aspect that I don't necessarily jive with, just because that's so far out of my element, I guess. So then I went on to the second book, which is The Maddest Obsession. Hold on. I gave The Sweetest Oblivion 3 stars. Then I went on to The Maddest Obsession, which I gave 4 stars. And this one I liked quite a bit more. This is about Christian and Gianna. And to me, they have like the ultimate love story. Their story spans like 10 years or something like that. And she had an arranged marriage with one of the mafia bosses. And then something happens and she marries somebody else who is just old. She just decides to marry them when she's told, like, you need to remarry. She picks the oldest person because she just doesn't want to deal with it anymore, which I get. And then, you know, that ends, obviously, because this gentleman is quite old. And she kind of comes back together with Christian, who she has had a history with. And I really enjoyed their story. I think it's my favorite in the little trilogy. I don't know if there's more books coming out for that one or not, but I did give that one 4 stars. I did like it. Gianna is a freaking hoot. She had me cracking up. And Christian is like your typical grumpy, but like really attractive grumpy man who will do anything for her, and I enjoyed their story. So then I went on to The Darkest Temptation, which is Christian's brother Ronan and a girl named Mila. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I think I just like Tristan and Ronan's characters quite a bit. And basically Mila is raised away from Russia, which is where her dad is from, and she ends up going there because he didn't come see her for her birthday, and she wants to know why. And then she just kind of becomes this pawn in this like crazy mafia game, and it was quite interesting. I did really enjoy that one, so I gave that one 4 stars as well. Ronan, he kind of tricked me in the beginning. I thought he was like, could be a good guy. Turned out not to be a good guy, but then he was like so in love with Mila that you kind of like him again. So that was that one. All right, I think I'm almost done. And then I read The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. This is a young adult book. It's like a young adult fiction. And I read this one very quickly. It was, I think I read it in one night. So Eden is, I don't want to say the word on my channel because I don't want to get in trouble. Something happens with her and her brother's best friend that is not consensual. And this book follows her through high school as she navigates what happened to her. So it's not written in chapters. It's written in like freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. And you just kind of follow her through as she navigates what happened to her. And she really does have like a downfall. I mean, she kind of falls from grace, as you will, like if you could, you know, imagine what I'm trying to say there. Obviously what happened was not her fault at all, but she just can't process it. Like, how could you, right? I mean, I can't imagine, but she just has a really hard time navigating what happened. She puts herself in not ideal situations. Things happen and she becomes quite promiscuous and she loses friends and she takes advantage of people, and then it comes out what actually happened to her, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, how did we miss the signs? And yes, so it's hard to say that a book like that is a good book, right? But I could understand how maybe it would be a good book for young adults or somebody in, you know, might be geared more towards people that are in high school or whatever. But I gave this book 2 stars because again, I don't want to say I enjoyed the story, but it had my attention. But so much was left unresolved at the end of this book. So basically at the end, it's like, it's revealed that this happened, but then there's no like redemption for her. Like there's no like everything, I don't want to say like everything works out, but you're just left with the hard parts. You don't get anything resolved with the friends that she lost along the way, or you know, the things that she did to herself. You just don't get any resolution, and it kind of drove me nuts. I'm not somebody who necessarily needs a happy ending with every single book that I read, but a book like this that really like makes you think, it's like, can't we get something good that happens to this poor girl? That's just kind of how I felt. It was okay. It was a 2 star for me. So I think that probably says enough. So after that book, I felt like I needed something like, you know, maybe not happy-go-lucky, but I just needed something that wasn't that dark. So I decided to read Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This is a romance book, and it is quite taboo. So if you do not like taboo subjects, probably not going to like this one. This one is about, what is her name? Jordan? I think her name is Jordan. Sorry, I just got distracted. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry again. Steven just got back, so I heard the garage door. So, we are back. I don't even remember what I said about this book. So, I read Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This is a taboo subject book, so if this is not your cup of tea, I totally understand. So, this book follows Pike and Jordan. Jordan is the female lead, and she is dating Pike's son, which I cannot remember his name. And basically, he treats her like garbage. And because of him, they get thrown out of their apartment, and his dad, Pike, takes them in. And eventually things happen between the 2 of them. Now, this is an age gap. Obviously, it's boyfriend's dad, which, you know, they do break up. The son and Jordan break up. But things happen, and I don't mind. I like age gap stories. I don't know why, I just do. And I enjoyed this story because Jordan was so mature for her age, and I felt like regardless of the age gap, the 2 of them are soulmates. Like, they just belong together. And by the end of the book, the ex-boyfriend comes to that conclusion. Like, he understands that. I think I just put this in the wrong. I think I just messed that up. Oh well. He comes to that conclusion, and there is an epilogue, and the epilogue is really good. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. Again, if it's not your cup of tea, I understand. I'm not offended by that. All right, we are almost to the end of March. I have 2 books left. So after that book, I read The Favor by Suzanne Wright. This is a age gap, forced marriage, billionaire CEO type of thing. I think Vienna, it's Vienna and Dante. I think Vienna is his secretary, if I'm not mistaken, or his assistant, and he needs to be married for a year before he can inherit a certain amount of his trust fund. And it's not like, he's not doing it in like a bad way. It's to keep the money out of one of his siblings' hands who would just use it in a bad way. So it's, you know, they come to an agreement, and then eventually they just fall in love with each other. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars because I laughed, I cried, I like squealed multiple times. I hated his family so much, with the exception of one of his brothers, but I really enjoyed this book. I actually liked it so much that I picked up the physical copy, and I feel like that's a really good indication. I do keep a list of Kindle Unlimited books that I read that I would like to eventually have the physical copy of, but I don't always just go out and purchase them right away. But that one I did because I really enjoyed it. And then the last book of the month of March was The Third Baseman by Lulu Moore. This is another 5-star read for me. I loved this book. It's a second chance romance. It's between Jupiter and Marnie. Jupiter is a professional baseball player, and Marnie is a scientist at NASA. How they come to be is just, it's crazy. So Jupiter is like, I need this woman back. I love her so much. I did the wrong thing when I was a kid. I was scared. He was being drafted to the MLB, and he just, he broke it off, whatever. And you find out why he broke it off at the end of the book, and you're like, oh my gosh, that is just, it's actually so cute. Like, you're so mad at him for breaking it off in the beginning, but then you find out why he did it, and you're like, oh, you're just so cute. I loved this couple. They were so cute. I really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend. I believe this one is also on Kindle Unlimited. It must be, because I don't have the physical copy. So yes, loved that book. Okay, we have made it to April, and I'm still de-kitting my first project. I don't know why this always happens. I don't know that I will finish, but I will do the best that I can. 3746. A lot of these 3700 colors I don't have cards for, so I'm going to just put those ones aside, and I will get to it when I have a chance. 3747. Oh, I do have that one. So the first book that I read in April is All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. I have read, I think, 2 other books by this author, and I really enjoy her writing. Her books are super, super slow burn, so if you do not like a slow burn, you may not enjoy her work, but I highly recommend it. This was also a 5-star read for me. I had 3 in a row, which is crazy. I loved this book. So this book follows Tobias Road and Aurora, and she comes back to her kind of hometown. She kind of moved around growing up with her mother, and they landed in this small town, and it's where they stayed until something happened to her mother. She comes back, and she has rented a small apartment from who she thinks is Tobias, but it's actually his son, who rented it without his dad's knowing. So you kind of get that, like, interesting storyline. You think, like, she's finally getting her life back together after being broken up with, and you think this guy's gonna throw her out, but for some reason he's like, fine, but you're paying me double, which just made me laugh. And he ends up putting it, like, in his son's trust fund. It's cute. But she comes back because her mother was an avid hiker, and she wants to, like, feel close to her mother, and she wants a new start. So you get the storyline of her kind of coming to terms with whatever happened to her mom. She meets some of her old friends again, and she just kind of reconnects. And then you get the storyline with her and Tobias, which is so good. Now, I mentioned before that these are, like, super slow burn, and they are. So you get to, like, the 60% mark, and there's finally, like, some text about, like, he looked at her with, like, heat in his eyes or something, and you're like, oh my god, finally. Like, you get so excited. So I really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend. If you have never read a Mariana Zapata, I would recommend this one first, because I loved it. I wish I read this one before the other ones of hers that I have, but I loved this book. I think this is also an age gap. Pretty sure that it is. Okay, next up I have some books that are in a couple of different series, but the series are like combined. So I came across like a blurb about a book on Instagram and I was super intrigued by it. But then when I went looking for that book, I figured out that it's actually like a 3rd generation series. So I went back and decided to start the series from the beginning. So you have the Court High series, which follows one couple. And then you have the Court University series, which follows the friends of that couple. And they all have their own book. And then the next series, which I actually haven't read yet, which is the one that I was interested in first, is their kids getting their own books. So I'm going to talk about the Court High series all in one book. Like, it's 4 different books, but it could have just been one book because they're kind of shorter. The first one was like 160 pages, so they could have just combined them into one book, in my opinion. But the first series, Court High, follows December and this young gentleman named Royal Prince. Yes, his name is Royal Prince. How cringy. I actually enjoyed this series, though. It's kind of like a YA romance with a hint of mystery. Something happens to December's sister. She goes missing and nobody seems to really care. It ends up being like a cover-up and something absolutely tragic happened to her. And December befriends Royal, who was her sister's best friend, and they're kind of determined to figure out exactly what happened. Now, it's called Court High because there is this like secret society that Royal and his friends are in. It's like a multi-generational rich people thing, and the story kind of revolves around that. So I did enjoy it. I gave the first book, actually, did I give them all the same? Yeah, I gave the first 3 books in that series 3 stars, and then I give the 4th one 3.5 stars. So you just kind of follow the breakdown of everything that happened, and December and Royal's relationship, but then not relationship, and then they get back together, and lots of things happen. It's very interesting. The court just like falls apart from the inside, and it is interesting. I did enjoy it. Would I like recommend that everybody read it? No, but it was interesting. I liked it. I'm glad I went back and read all of the series before I get to the kids, because I like knowing what happened to their parents, especially if they have their own books. So that was the Court High series. So the first book is They the Pretty Stars. The second book is Illusions That May. Third book is Court Kept. And the 4th book is We the Pretty Stars. I did like it. It was fine. Then I decided to start the Court University series, which follows Royal's friends. And they each get 1 book. So Royal and December got 4, and then the friends each get a book in this next series. So book 1 follows Knight and Greer. The names are very interesting. I really liked Knight's character in the first series. He was like very protective of his friends, and I did like that. However, I didn't love... I guess I liked his book more than... Did I like his book the most? Maybe not. I gave this book 3.5 stars. There's kind of a really tragic storyline that goes through his book. Something had happened to his mother, and then his father died, and he's left with his grandfather, who turns out to be like an absolutely awful person. So it was interesting. I liked it enough. I liked Greer's character. She was cute. I feel like Knight was a bit of an a-hole, but his story is so tragic that you're like, ah, I kind of get it. So that's kind of how I felt about that one. And then I went on to Kingpin, which is LJ and Billy's story. I did not like this one. LJ... I don't know. I didn't like this one. I'm trying to remember if she was the, hold on. Yeah, so she is a TA at the university that LJ goes to, and he is like awful. Awful. The bullying was like next level, and then he does something with her mother, and it was just so strange. I did not like it. I gave it 3 stars because I did like Billy, and the story was interesting. Like what happened to Billy was interesting. There was some mystery mixed in that one that I did enjoy. Just LJ's character in particular, I didn't love. And that's kind of how I felt about most of the men in the series, because there was quite a bit of, it's like a bully romance, which I don't love. I don't love the bullying aspect personally. So not a favorite, but it was okay. Decided to take a break from that series after that book because I was very annoyed with it. So I went on to In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. This book was so cute. The main character's name is Shay. She's left a tulip farm when her step-grandmother passes away, and she was troubled when she was younger, so she went to live with her step-grandmother, and she enjoyed it there, and then she left, moved away. She became a teacher, and then she's left at the altar, and obviously has left this tulip farm, so she decides, I need to take some time away. I need to get over what happened to me, and I'm gonna go do it at this tulip farm. Well, she finds out that there is a clause in her inheritance that says she needs to be married within the year to inherit the tulip farm, or else it'll go back to the town, I think. So she gets there and she runs into a friend from high school. His name is Noah, and he looks completely different. Like in high school, he was, I think he was like a nerd, and he was kind of chubby, and they were really good friends, but he had a crush on her and she didn't really feel the same way. So he's like, well, I'll marry you. So they end up getting married. They keep it a secret. And then the rest ensues. He is now the legal guardian of his niece. Her name was Jenny, I think. She was freaking hilarious. Like, what a pip. Oh my gosh. She had me cracking up. I loved that kid. She like had some serious trauma in her life, so she was like very crass, and she would like swear she thought she was a pirate. It was so cute. I really enjoyed it. If I'm remembering correctly, there was no third act breakup in this one. I gave this book 3.5 stars because I did like it. It just dragged a little bit. I felt like it could have been a little bit more like, okay, this is the story. It was almost 500 pages, and I felt like it could have been at least 100 pages less, but whatever. I did like it. I do recommend if you're looking for a cute romance to read. We're almost done. After that, I read Dirty Curve by Megan Brady. This book I had very high hopes for because I loved Say You Swear by this author. That is a 5-star read for me. This book, not so much. This one was 3 stars. And the storyline was just kind of strange. This was another one where like the main male character was such a bully at first. So he's like this big baseball prospect, and his coach is concerned about his grades, and he's like, you need a tutor. So there's this tutor. Her name is, what is her name? Meyer. I think her name's Meyer. She starts tutoring him, and the coach is like, you need to be at his beck and call. And she's like, you know I can't do that. Which, there's something between the two of them that was crazy. It like blew my mind. So basically she's told like, you have to, or I will ruin your life. So there's kind of like a blackmail mystery type of thing to it. Not really a mystery, but it is a mystery. And it turns out that she's a single mother. She's working 2 jobs just to kind of try to keep her life afloat. She's in school, and once Tobias figures that out, he's like, oh my God, I'm such a jerk. And it's like, yeah, you really are. So you follow them as like, they kind of try to navigate that, and then something big happens, and yeah, crazy. I did enjoy it. It just didn't live up to the expectation that I had for this author. So it was just a 3-star for me. Okay, after that, I read The Sister Between Us by Haley Dickert. This is, I believe, this author's debut, and I was amazed. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I have like nothing but good things to say about this book, but it just didn't give me that like, I just read the greatest book feeling. It had the potential, these colors are so different, whatever. It had that potential. Something was just missing for me, and I can't quite pinpoint what it was. But this book is about 3 friends. So Leah and Claire are best friends, and Leah has a twin brother named Johnny, I believe. No, Jake. His name is Jake. And as they grow older, Leah and Jake kind of start to realize that they have feelings for each other. So they start to date in the background. They don't really tell anybody. They kind of keep it a secret. And then something absolutely gut-wrenchingly tragic happens to one of the people in this group. And you follow the other 2 as they kind of come to terms with what happened. It makes you feel. I was crying. I was crying through a good portion of this book. Highly recommend. I was so like, when I found out it was her first book, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what she has next. And I believe that the younger sibling of the twins in this book is getting her own book, and I am so excited. I can't wait to read that. So definitely excited. This author is on my radar, and I'm very much looking forward to that follow-up book. Okay, and then I read My Dark Romeo by Parker S. Huntington and L.J. Shen. I love Parker S. Huntington. We talked about her earlier in this video, and this is her newest release. I gave this book 3.5 stars. This is kind of, it's not really mafia. Is it mafia? No, it's not mafia, but it's kind of like rich, entitled men. So something happens. The main characters are, oh gosh, what are their names? I don't think I wrote their names down. Yeah, anyway, the main male character is like looking for revenge. So he shows up at this, I think it's like a Tillian, and embarrasses this other person's daughter, who happens to be our main female lead, and destroys her arranged marriage with somebody else who she thinks she's in love with. Ends up she's not. And then you just kind of follow these 2 as they are basically enemies. They despise each other. She's so ticked off at him. I think her name is Dallas. Yeah, it's Dallas and Romeo. His name is actually Romeo. Like, what? And she is hilarious. Like, she eats all the time. And she's like, does nothing. And he's like, you're so lazy. So it's just interesting, but funny, but also like cringy. But I liked it at the same time. The ending was there for me. I loved the ending. I don't love L.J. Shen's writing, so I didn't have really high hopes. I'm kind of bummed that Parker S. Huntington just didn't release this book on her own. I'm going to get rid of this 3865 because I have so much of it in my stash, so just pretend I'm not dumping these out. So yeah, I don't love L.J. Shen's writing, so it was just okay for me. It was a 3.5 star. After that, I started the Boys of Toman series, which is by Chloe Walsh. This is a fiction romance type of book, but it's not heavy on the romance. There is obviously a couple, but that's not what this story focuses on. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. This book follows Johnny and Shannon. Johnny is like a rugby prodigy. This takes place in Ireland, I think. And so there is a little bit of like a learning curve with some of the slang terms that are used, but it was so good. Shannon is such a strong character. she's written not to be. Like, she goes through so much trauma, like absolute gut-wrenching trauma. I was crying so many times in this book. But she is bullied so awfully, is that a word? That she is moved schools. She cannot stay in the school that she was in, and she goes and she meets Johnny at her new school, and the rest is kind of history, and I absolutely loved it. I really did. Highly recommend. It's not spicy at all. Like, obviously, two characters do end up in a relationship or attempt to end up in a relationship, but it does not focus on the romance aspect, really. It more so focuses on what Shannon has been through and how the heck she has been able to keep it together as long as she has. Such a good book. I decided to go back on my Kindle, back to that Court University book series. So I read Beautiful Brute, which is the story of Jax and I don't know her name. I can't think of it. Basically, he is like out for revenge for his dad. So he decides that he's going to move down to Florida, I think it is, to attend college where his dad lives. And he basically hunts down his stepsister who has never met him. And he does something to her and then just is the biggest asshole. I hated this book. I hated it so much. I hated his character. He did have character development by the end of it, but I hated him so much in the beginning. It was so awful, the stuff that he did. I gave this book 2 stars. I could probably give it 1 star. I did not like. No, not at all. So then I went to Keeping 13, which is the sequel to Binding 13. This is book 2 in the Boys of Tommen series, and it picks up right where Binding 13 left off, which was on a cliffhanger, and it is horrendous what happens. I cried. And then you just follow the aftermath of that and everything that happens to Johnny and Shannon, and they just stick it out, and they are 2 of my favorite characters ever. 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. Decided to go back to the Court University series again for the final book, which is called Lover. Now this book is a reverse age gap, so the female lead is older than the male. I really enjoyed it. This book redeemed some of the other books in this series. It was so good. I think I would probably give it a 4 star. I wrote down 5 stars, but after talking about Binding and Keeping 13, there's just no way that this is a 5 star, but it is the best in the series, in my opinion. This one follows Ramses, and of course I can't remember her name. This is one of the books that I haven't finished my book log on, so I cannot remember her name, but she is a professor. They meet at a wedding from one of the earlier characters in the series, and obviously don't know that they're professor student. Something happens, and then they're kind of left to navigate what happens, and you follow her inner turmoil. Like, she's very upset about it. She knows it's not right, and she can't believe that it happened and whatever. I really enjoyed this couple. It just felt so much more mature than the other characters. They were like actually functioning adults, and I really enjoyed that. Okay, is it worth, yeah, let me grab my other, let me grab another kit so I can at least start kitting down. I'm almost done, but that's okay. We'll finish the rest of this off camera, but all right, so the next book I read is Sweet Dandelion by it looks like Michaela, but I figured out it's not Michaela. It's like Macalia or something. Smeltzer. I love this author. She wrote the Wildflower duet that I gushed about in one of my earlier videos. This one follows a teenage girl who I don't want to say what happened to her because A, it's not really like YouTube friendly, and it's quite a controversial topic, but something happens to her and she ends up moving in with her brother, and she has to start at a new school. She's dealing with all of this trauma and it's horrific. And she ends up, this is another taboo book, which Makalia Smeltzer tends to do. Like, she does a lot of age gap and somewhat taboo subjects. So if that's not your cup of tea, then you may not like this one, but I encourage you to maybe read the blurb at least. She ends up with a new counselor at her new school, and things just kind of happen. Now, this book in real life wouldn't fly. Like, if this situation happened in real life, it wouldn't fly. Now, the counselor she's 18 when this happens. He's 30, I think. So age gap, yes. If this was outside of a school setting, I think people would probably be like, okay, whatever. But in real life, if this happened, regardless of her age, this man would be in jail. So again, not something I condone in real life, but I did enjoy the book. I really enjoyed the book, actually. The two of them are just, she's Dandelion, obviously is her name, and his name is Lachlan, and they just connect on this level that I know, like I'm saying, in real life, it's not okay. This is a book, so do with that what you will. I loved it though. I gave it 5 stars, so just saying. And then I decided to read the little novella that was available on Kindle Unlimited called Sweet Christmas. And this just follows their first Christmas together since they came back at the end of the first book. I will say that Lachlan had one redeeming thing that happened in the first book. The way that he went about it, I hated because he broke her heart, but he basically just walked away so that she could live her life and experience things. And it was at such a cost to himself, but he knew that what he did was not right. So I don't like the way he did it. And again, I don't condone what happened in the book in real life, but in terms of reading a book, I did enjoy it. So the actual book got a 5-star for me. The novella got a 3-star because it's a novella and you really aren't getting like a story, if you will. So we're almost done. I'm not going to talk about the next book I read, actually, because it was awful and it was basically pure smut. And I was like, what am I reading? But then I needed to know the storyline. So I'm not going to talk about that one, but I did read another book. We're just going to skip over that. After that book, I started Haunting Adeline, which is by H.D. Carlton. Oh, guys, I listened to the audiobook. I decided to sign up for a free trial of Audible, and you get 2 free credits. And I was like, I've heard that the audiobook is good, so that's what I listened to. I don't know how I feel. I don't know. It's a super, super dark romance, like very dark romance. There are some scenes that happen that are just like, what's happening? So not a favorite. I gave it 3 stars. I don't know if I'll amend that rating in the future, but it is what it is. I didn't love it. I don't know. Let me know if you've read that book. We have 2 left. After that, I read How to Make Friends with the Dark by Kathleen Glasgow. This is basically just a fiction book about a young girl whose mother passes away, and you just follow her as she navigates what that means. She goes to foster care, and then it turns out she has a sister she didn't know about, so you follow the 2 of them learning to navigate that. She kind of, I don't want to say she loses it because people do things in grief that are just, it is what it is, but she goes down a pretty dark path. She starts doing certain things that she never would have done before, and it's heartbreaking. It's a very sad book. I rated it 3 stars because I just felt like we could have gotten a little bit more. But if you're looking for a fiction book that definitely makes you feel like it puts grief into perspective, I do recommend that one. I did enjoy it. It made me cry. I cried quite a bit during that book. Okay, last one for April. I read / listened to The Stopover. If you download this on Kindle Unlimited and you have an Audible account, you get the audiobook to borrow for free. So that's what I did. This book was so cringy. I gave it 2.5 stars. These 2 people meet on an airplane. The airplane is grounded because of weather, and they decide to basically be together for one night. And then a year later, the main character shows up for a job. She was recently hired at a new job, and it turns out it's his company. And it was just kind of cringy. I didn't really love it. The things that they say and the phrases that this author used were just very strange, which I ended up finding out that she is British, but she's writing this book as if they're American. So she says certain things or writes certain things that just don't make sense to Americans, basically. So I didn't love it. I gave it 2.5 stars. The main male character is just kind of cringy. The main female character is annoying. Just didn't love it. I'm gonna leave it there. So those are all of the books that I read in both March and April. This video is so long. My phone just popped up with the your phone's gonna die, so I need to end this video. I read 26 books in March, 21 books in April. Very excited to figure out what I'm reading in May. I still don't know. I'm filming this on the last day of April, so I need to make my May TBR. So once again, I did not finish Kidding, but that's okay. I will do it this evening. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I'm glad we were able to catch up I'm glad we were able to catch up with the books that I read in March and then add in the April ones. So let me know if you guys are still liking this type of video where we sit down together and we talk books. I don't really talk books with anybody else, so it's fun to kind of think back to what I read over the last month. So again, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I will be back on Friday with a post review. I hope to see you guys then. And yeah, until then, bye.